Hi guys, welcome back to the T84 rebuild. For those of you who are joining us, welcome on board. If you want to look down in my other videos, you can see where we've got to and how we're here at the moment with this T84, which should be quite useful. But for those of you who've been following along, today we're just going to look at setting up the synchros then in the T84 using the shims that we discussed in an earlier video. Now, unfortunately, I managed to pick up the wrong shims, so which has set me back by a week or so, which is rather annoying, but here we go. These are the shims that I picked up, and these ones here go on this shaft here, and they actually help space out the second gear. So if you've got movement and play in your second gear backwards and forwards, and it can rock around too much, you put in the shims on this area, which if I pull up this shaft, is along here, they fit along here. And they remove the play of the second gear, which runs here. So I don't need those for this gearbox or for this transmission. These are fine. So those ones were not helpful, unfortunately. So I had to go to order from France again a set of shims, the correct set of shims, which go down here instead. They fit back here and they space out the rear bearing. And unfortunately, these little shims cost about €4 each. And you need a couple of them, obviously, to get the correct sizing. Then you've got to get the postage as well and everything. So it ended up costing about €35 just for these tiny little shims. But there you go. And unfortunately, that's what you've got to do sometimes. So at the moment, what we've done then is back here, between the bearing and the snap ring, hiding inside the seal there, I fitted 1.3mm worth of shims. I fitted quite a lot of shims to start off to see if it makes a difference. And the answer to that, guys, is that yes, it definitely does make a huge difference. And it's made too much difference on this first attempt. So what we can see then is we've got it in second gear at the moment, but let's look at third gear here, the locking ring here. So we can see it's there is movement. It can snap backwards and forwards between the dogs. So that's okay, but look how tight it is. There's no fore and aft movement whatsoever. It's pushed up hard against here, even though it can rotate. It's far too snug. And if we look at the dog, if I rotate it up here, you can see the dog is tight against the cone there and pushing it, driving it on. So this is far too little play there. There's no slot whatsoever. So this would just be dragging. So this is too much. So we're going to have to remove some there. So let's move it out into neutral, and then let's put it into third. There we go. And then on third, you can see again the dog is pushing right up there. As you can see actually that without the fork on it, that the sleeve has gone across too far because the detent is out. So that's not where it would sit if the fork was on. So let's, oh, hello. This is the problem when it's all apart. So now the rears come out. So let's see, get them to come across. No, it's not going to move at the moment. However, if we push it together, let's have a look. What's seconds like then? Yeah, there's no movement there whatsoever. So in the furthest forward position, further than it would go normally with the fork, you can see that it's totally locked and the dog is totally tight. So 1.3mm is far too much then. So I reckon I might drop it down. We could try 5mm. First. So if we drop it down to 0.8 and see how we get on with that. You have to remember this isn't tight at all, so it's tight like this without the force pushing this rear bearing in and pushing this shaft forward. So even when it's loose like this, it's really tight. So imagine when the nut is on the back, tightened up, and everything is pushed together, how tight that would be then. So let's get on with that. Let's take this all apart, get it all separated again, and drop the shim back there down to 0.8, and we'll see how we get on with that. So guys, what I decided to do then is I thought 0.8 perhaps would be a little bit too much, so I've gone for 0.5 instead, because once the bearing is tightened on the back and it's all cinched up, that'll remove some slop as well. So I pretty much halved the I've over halved what I'd put in there now. So there's 0.5mm of shim in there. So it's in third at the moment. The sleeve is just sort of in a guessed position because obviously we haven't got the shifter rail on at the moment. So let's have a look then. What have we got? We come down to second. You can see there's a gap now, and it can rock backwards and forwards a bit, and it can move backwards and forwards as well. So It's not a huge amount, but I don't think it's excessive. Remember, we can't affect second too much, but that's I think that's pretty good. And then that's third, so the shafts are rotating together. So let's try and knock it into neutral then, carefully without firing everything out the back. Oh, that's slid across nicely. So separated. There's no binding between the two, so that's good. Yeah, they're rotating pretty easily independently there. And then let's put it into second then. Try and get you. That's the cat to come to greet me. You don't know much about... No, don't jump on the table. You don't know much about transmissions, unfortunately, Mose. Right, we've got rid of the cat now, so hopefully things should move around a little bit less. So what have we got? Let's have a look. Yeah, that's moving nice and freely. It's got a good fore and aft movement. Nothing excessive there. Remember, once we tighten it up, this should reduce a little bit. It doesn't look as though it can go wonky easily, which is what I was worried about. You know, it's slamming around. I think that looks similar to what the second gear was like. Perhaps a touch more to what the second gear was originally like, remember, when we said that's how it sat within its fixed area. So that's the sort of gap you get there with the blocking between the dog and the blocking ring there. So what's that, 1.5 mil perhaps? 1.5 on there. I think that's pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. Remember, that will tighten up. It should tighten up a little bit as well when we put it all together, which is what we'll do. So the next thing to do then is to put the shifter rail on. Put the shifter rail on, put the fork on, and then let's see how second and third gear actually sits, because we want, remember, we want this sleeve to be totally centralised, sitting on the hub below it here. We don't want it to be off to one side like that or off to one side like that, and you can't change where the fork sits because it's fixed on the poppets on which go in here, on the poppets on the shifter rail, so you can't change that. But you don't want it off to one side because obviously it'll be pushing against one blocking ring too hard. So we'll see how it goes. There's neutral, turning all independently and everything. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. Let's get that shifter rail on. So guys, right then, we've now got the output gear on there, tightened up. We've got the shift rail on, and we've got it all done in. So when we rotate it, that's freely rotating. For the input shaft is freely rotating with no binding. You can see that the blocking ring goes backwards and forwards, so it's not binding on the shaft or the cone, which is nice. So if we then rotate the output there, that's rotating pretty good as well. The shifter rail is not contacting either side. There's a bit of play in it. This is a brand new fork, and this is a brand new waff. Got the cat to help again. That's a brand new Willys of France sleeve there and synchro. So these are all NOS parts. So this is how the fit should be from the factory. So it should be able to move. It looks like it can walk backwards and forwards just a touch there. But the sort of play we've got then is, that's what we're looking at, guys. So just a touch of play, and it's free to move. It's not binding. It's free to move backwards and forwards in neutral. And then out the way, Mose. Right, we got rid of the cat. He wasn't particularly helpful. So yeah, so third then is looking like that. I'm not sure whether it's just a touch too much. Let's try and get it into. Let's go into second gear then. Okay, so we're into second now. Still free to rotate. Just a touch of drag there, but nothing excessive. I mean, that's fine. So let's have a look at what sort of clearance we've got there. We can see it on the dog, how the synchro ring, the blocking ring, fits in with the dog. So this is third gear. I think that's about right. There's nothing excessive. It's slightly tight, perhaps just a touch, but it's free to move, it's free to rotate, so it's not dragging, it's not going to wear it out as it sits like this. It's not going to wear it out or anything like that. Can rock backwards and forwards. I can do it with my fingers. Remember, it's not all oiled up. There's a bit of oil, nothing excessive. That's the sort of distance we've got. So I don't think that's bad, that third there. I think that's pretty good. And you can see how where the cane is holding it. That's the position that the sleeve should be in then. So let's get it into third. Okay, so we're in third now, so the whole thing should rotate as one, which it is. There's no binding or dragging on the fork, so it's sitting within the sleeve correctly, so that's all right. And the sleeve itself can rock backwards and forwards on the play there, just a touch. And it's sitting on the dog just at the edge there, but obviously you don't want it to go, if this is positioned incorrectly, the sleeve could go too far forward and you can see it would come off the dog, and the dog can come out and jam there, and that's how your gearbox gets jammed in gear. So sometimes if you guys, if you're driving along, say you're in third or something, or second, and you can't get it out, that's because these little dogs, the sleeve has gone too far, it's too worn, or it's set up incorrectly, and the dogs are pinged up and they'll be sitting up here and they'll be blocking you from pushing the sleeve back, so it's locked in gear. So then let's have a look at second then. So yeah, it's rotating nicely. It's got a bit of play. Similar sort of gap between first, I think. And let's have a look. It's free to go backwards and forwards against the dog. It's not excessive and it's not too little, you know. I think that's pretty good, and it might be a little bit tighter than that when it's actually all done up, as we said. This one's just a bit skew-off on there. There's the gap on that one. A bit more gap on that one. Less gap on that one. I don't know, guys. I think that's pretty good, really. I think that's about what we're looking for. Nothing excessive, it's not binding, and nothing too little. So the next thing to do will be to put the transfer case on the end and bolt it up, and then we'll have the force pushing the rear shaft forward, the output shaft forwards, to how it will actually be in the Jeep, and then we can really look at exactly how much slop we do have in the end. So I think that's 0.5 of a millimetre worth of shim there, and I think that amount of play is pretty good. Let's push it back into neutral. Nope, too far. There we go. Back into neutral. Rotate separately and easy. It's not dragging. That's pretty good. Pretty pleased with that, guys. Right then, let's get the transfer case on.